You are listening to the Signal to Noise podcast on the ProSoundWeb Podcast Network, sponsored by Audix.
I wish I could break free, back to where I'm supposed to be. I wish I could break free, back to where I'm supposed to be.
Welcome back to the Signal to Noise podcast. As usual, I'm joined by my dashing co-hosts, Kyle Chirnside and Chris Leonard. What's going on, gentlemen?
How's it going?
Kyle's outside for this episode.
I am. Beautiful Lake Mills, Wisconsin, on a little vacay birthday family member having it up here. So
Is it
the
your
lake
birthday?
is actually, no, I've had too many this year. Way over there. And if it was my birthday, I'd be at Sizzler and not here.
And-
Because dinner's free at Sizzler on your birthday, just for
So-
future reference.
We don't have those around here, so that's not helpful to me, but hopefully it'll help somebody. But also, for the regular listeners, you may know that Kyle's outside because you may be watching us in video, which is a new thing that Kyle's been pushing for us to set up, and I think we finally talked Chris into making it happen. So we're going to try it out.
We had to tell him to put a shirt back on in order for us to do video, but we're here.
Chris looks like a Marvel superhero with the magenta coming out of his body.
Very fancy backdrop. I'm in the guest bedroom. But on to more exciting and important topics. Our guest this evening, this episode, is someone I'm very excited to talk to, Mr. Steve Adelman. He's the Vice President of the Event Safety Alliance, and he's head of Adelman Law Group, based in Scottsdale, Arizona, or as Steve says, on the hot side of the sun. Steve, thanks for being on the show, man.
Oh, you're welcome. It's air conditioned, so any place is better than outside right now.
The reason that I reached out to you, Steve, to come and talk to us on this episode is because your work with the ESA, you guys have released a couple of what I think are very important bits of guidance for our industry for what's coming for us in the coming months. You had some standards on a guide to reopening. And a recent standard on crowd management. And I think these are things that are well within our purview, things that we're going to have to be dealing with, things that we want to be aware of as we go forward and try to do these events in a way that gets everybody back to work, but obviously keeps everybody safe. And so we want to just kind of go through some of those guidelines with you, Steve, and get your thoughts on some of these topics, because like I said, they're kind of they're things that we're going to have to be paying attention to going forward. So thank you in advance for your time, man. This is going to be cool.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Chris, did you have something you wanted to jump in with? I know you were digging into. Steve's got some great YouTube videos.
Wait,
everybody.
Yeah.
Say that.
So I'll dump a bunch of links in the description of the podcast. Steve's got a YouTube channel with some of the stuff that he's done or other webinars that he's been a part of. I spent a good bit of the day today consuming them, along with the Event Safety Alliance's guide to reopen and stuff like that, which we'll have links down below for, of course.
So this means we're going to get our jobs back, is what you're saying.
Well, in order to get our jobs back, we have to do things right? I
wash my hands.
Well, that's such an important place to start, because I said a couple of months ago, I said our industry's under a microscope right now, and it's going to be as we go forward. And this is not the time to cut corners and try to get our budget as small as it can be for events and do stupid genie lift roofs and stuff like that. This is just not the time.
Right.
Because we're going to, if someone screws this up, and Steve, this is your area, so we're going to let you jump in on this. But my feeling is that if someone screws something up now, that's going to set everybody back. And so this is just not the time to try to cut corners on anything.
Well, that's actually what we wrote in the Event Safety Alliance reopening guide. One of our early lines, on like page 2 or 3 was, the smaller venues are going to get to reopen first, but every time they open, the spotlight is on them. So they have an opportunity to succeed or fail. If they succeed, we get to try again the next night. If they fail, they not only fail for themselves, but for everybody who's queued up waiting for the opportunity to try to reopen safely.
And that's harsh that it's going to be a small club situation, because usually they can't even get their floors not to be sticky. Just being truthful.
I suppose there's some truth to that. I'm not quite that cynical, but it turns out that failure is pretty widespread for lots of different reasons. The failure that I find really annoying is willfully ignorant failure. So before we started this recording, I joked, it's great to see you guys on a Friday evening. I'm really glad that none of you is in Sturgis tonight.
Yep.
Because that's the kind of failure that is completely self-inflicted. There will be people who get sick in Sturgis over the course of however many days it is, and that's going to set back the opportunities that other shows might have had, because somebody's going to say, oh my God, Smash Mouth performed and we've heard of them. And now, there's mass contagion all around the northern Midwest because people had to go.
Yeah.
Right.
And my friend is the front of house engineer for that. So I've been watching his Facebook feed. So shout out to Scott for being up there. But he's he's into the masks. He's into making sure everything's safe. He was really worried about getting on the plane to even go there. I followed his timeline to it. And he did say when he got to the stage, there were things that they were definitely paying attention to. There were hand washing stations. People were wearing masks. But obviously, you dig in way further than that in your safety guide. And I think that's where we need to go with it. We can't just take the little things, because now, even in the state of Missouri, I saw a post today that they're making promoters and show responsibility on those people if someone gets sick. So now there's going to be, and I'm glad you smiled about that, because we'll probably have to talk about that too.
Well, I can answer all this because I watched all of Steve's videos today.
Well, we will have to talk about it because, these are like planets colliding. On the one hand, everybody who puts on a show is worried, oh my God, if I put on a show and a bunch of people say that they got sick at my show, does that mean that I'm going to lose my house, my car, my life savings? Spoiler alert, no. But at the same time that there is increasing pressure on back of house people and promoters to make good choices, states are also passing laws which immunize exactly those people from the legal consequences of their actions. And, well-meaning people can disagree about whether these statutes, state statutes, are a good thing because they help to get our industry reopened, or they're not such a good thing because they disincentivize people from taking health and safety as seriously as they would if they had to worry about lawsuits. Now, period, just stick a pin in that thought for a second. Actually, the whole conversation is kind of silly because, for reasons that I've explained in some of my YouTube videos and can explain here today, it turns out that there isn't actually a whole lot of legal exposure because of the way the system of tort law works. It'll be exceptionally difficult for somebody who goes to any show to say, unlike all the other places that I went to, I got sick at your event, and therefore you're the one who's liable. So all these state-by-state legal protections and, the Federal CARES Act, whatever is the correct name of Mitch McConnell's bill, these are addressing a problem which is not actually a significant legal risk, but it's certainly one that a lot of people are frightened about because they're worried about getting sued all the time. A legitimate concern. But in this case, there are, what we call countervailing forces. On the one hand, we want people to be safe by having health and safety taken into account, sort of baked into the planning of events. On the other hand, we don't want people to get, sued over and over again, such that as they're trying to crawl out of this economic quicksand, that they get dragged right back in again through litigation. But it turns out that that's actually not that big a risk. It's really a very small risk. In fact, it's exceedingly unlikely that this is really a problem. So, always my concern is, what are we doing to keep people healthy and safe? I'm vice president of the Event Safety Alliance. We take health and safety really seriously. That's the end game for us. But I'm also a lawyer. And so I can look at the risk of litigation and the likelihood of success of any lawsuit, which is to say, from our standpoint, the likelihood of losing, because we're on the industry side, and I can give a pretty clear-eyed view of what actually is the risk. And in this case, talking about COVID-19, the risk of, someone who's doing audio, someone who's promoting a show, someone who's, standing post working security, any of the people in an operational capacity, including the artist on stage, they're not going to lose a COVID-19 related lawsuit. They're just not. And I can explain the legal reasons for that, because there actually are legal reasons. It requires me to teach you a little law, but I can do that and it won't hurt, even on a Friday night.
Well, I think we can maybe get to some of the law. I think one of the things that was overarching in what I've heard you say is, there's this proverbial, we're all in this together, right? Well, if we actually mean that, then I think some people might go, oh, I don't need to read this reopening guide because I'm not a promoter, I'm not the venue, I'm not this, right? But we've touched this on actually, Michael, on another episode thing you did. Hey, if we see a rigger doing something wrong, we're responsible for actually saying something to that rigger that's unsafe. Or if I see someone doing something, like there's some type of responsibility. So I feel it's also necessary for, if we're in this industry period, we're going to be going to any type of crowd gathering, whether you're in catering, whether you're in merch, whether you're a loader in a truck. I think a lot of these things need to be thought about, and because we all have to do our part in all of this. And so there's so much detail in that guide that hits all these different areas. So one of the things that made me think about it's like, oh, loading trucks and unloading trucks right now is not going to be the same. Pinning line array right now, and stacking PA boxes is not going to be the same, because we're not going to be able to be very social distant. We have to take measures to space ourselves out more. It's going to take, we're going to have more time to load in. Those types of things need to be taken into consideration. So a question I would have is, or a thought is, when you guys were writing this or going into, and this goes to the crowd management side too, I assume the approach has to be safety first and then lawsuit second, or liability second, right? It can't be, oh, well, let's write all the things we'll make sure we don't want to be liable for or liable against. It's, hey, no, we are focused on safety first, right? I mean, it has to be the approach.
Yes. And that actually, well, obviously, that was the approach. It's always our approach. ESA's motto is life safety first, which is a direct response to the old notion, the show must go on. Well, we want the show to go on. We work really hard to make the show go on, but not because we're willing to sacrifice safety, but rather because we take safety really seriously and we're good at our jobs and we're good at teaching other people to take it seriously also. I mean, think about it. It's a pandemic. We're all physically able. I mean, we could go up to Sturgis. We could say, the hell with this COVID-19. I don't believe it's not going to affect me. The usual NIMBY stuff, not in my backyard. Couldn't affect me. We could say that, and then we could do whatever damn shows we want. But it's not a good idea. And that's the distinction from which ESA was born. And, that's kind of what we're all dealing with now. People who feel like either they're willing to take safety seriously, like you guys and your listeners, which is fantastic, or the people who are willfully ignorant, who basically say, fuck it, don't care. Let's party.
Yeah, the concept, for me is this concept of professional and social responsibility. To me, asking the question, well, am I the one that could be held responsible if this system fails and somebody hurts? That's an important question, but it's not the most important question. I mean, my question is, well, why do you want to be involved with a system that fails and hurts somebody? Whether or not you're the one that ends up getting the rap for it, I don't want to be involved in that, right? I mean, just from an ethical and moral and professional standpoint, that's not something that I want to be involved in. I think it's too easy to gloss over that for a lot of people. As soon as they find out that you're probably personally not going to be the one whose head's going to roll over this, they're like, well, let's do it then. That's not how it works. I don't think that's a good idea.
I agree with that. The way I've been spending my evenings recently when I finally stopped working is I'm rewatching the entire, multiple seasons of The Good Place, which is all about moral philosophy. It's what we owe to each other. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, it's fine for one person to be able to do their jobs safely. That's great. Certainly better than not. But I agree. We have some moral obligation to each other, to our fellow workers, as well as to our patrons who, after all, pay the bills that allow us to do our work. We have a moral obligation to do what we're able to do to keep everybody safe.
Yeah, and I think, as Chris was saying, on a show site there, there's a lot of really reputable, great companies out there that I work with. And if anybody sees anything that they think is safe, not unsafe, excuse me, or, maybe isn't could be a problem, they want you to speak up. It doesn't matter if Chris is in the lighting department and I'm an audio person and I see Chris's department doing something stupid, I'm going to speak up. But there are a lot of companies where they just don't seem to care, and it's all about how do we do this cheaper, and these are the ones that are not insured and are coming in and they're bidding at a quarter of the price of a more reputable company, and so I think in a way it's a little bit self-selecting, where the reputable companies have decided that no, it's important to us to do things the right way and to do them safely, and that's a culture that they built and they encourage. And so the people who work with those companies and the artists who do shows with those companies, that sort of feeds itself, and you end up with a good situation where we're all concerned about each other, our welfare professionally, our welfare personally. And so I think that's that idea from a cultural standpoint, I think could be a really big force in what we're talking about in the coming months, which is we have to decide as an industry if we're going to take this seriously and if we are, committed to doing this safely.
Then you get to circle back around, Michael, to like we first opened the whole show with, was this is going to happen in small clubs first. And we're putting the responsibility on clubs that don't have the money or the funds or the extra time. I mean, like I said, making a joke about the sticky floors is pretty much that's going to be our standard. We have to get those people to, care about that stuff too. And it's going to start at that level. So how do we become advocates to help our fellow small clubs and small venues become more safe? I mean, we don't want to become Karens here. And another thing is we don't want shows to open and someone get accused of doing something at the venue that is going to cause this COVID social media outburst about, oh, so-and-so didn't spray off the handles at the door, so he's got, there might be COVID there now. Like, that's more detrimental to that venue. Moving forward, it's almost like two steps back. It's like a rape accusation. Oh, so-and-so's got a rape accusation. All of a sudden, it turns into the telephone game of now they're a rapist and they haven't even went to trial or been charged yet. We kind of got to cut through the BS and quit living through that and learn how to help out our lower level so we can get these little venues open. We can get these drive-in things happening. This thing I've been reading all day today that you sent over it's eloquent. It really is, because I think stagehands can get it. I think promoters can get it at the end of the day. So how are you going to try to get this to the people that you need to?
Well, as far as the reopening guide, we've gotten it into an enormous number of hands. So we are well over 100,000 copies around the world. We've got it translated into like 10 foreign languages already.
Wow.
With more on the way. So the Event Safety Alliance Reopening Guide has had a lot of traction. All of the major promoters, all the minor ones that we know of, industry professionals in every aspect of back of house, lots of the front of house operations companies as well. So knowing what to do, whether from ESA's guidance, or there are other excellent organizations that have subsequently put out guidance that, a lot of it looks like ours, which is very flattering. Knowing what to do at this point in August of 2020, that's not the high hurdle. That's not a problem anymore. And I think there's widespread consensus among people who take COVID-19 seriously. There's widespread consensus on what to do. It's not hard. It's only 3 things, social distancing, 6 feet or 2 meters if you prefer metric. So social distancing, face covering, hand washing. There you go. So that's it. Everything else is just commentary on those 3 things. Knowing what to do. Yeah, we've solved that puzzle. But oh my God, look at the incidents. I mean, just follow the stinking news.
Yep.
You know, did the company that organized the chain smokers show, you know, with the CEO DJ, did they really not understand that social distancing is important, especially when you don't enforce face coverings? Did they not know that? Of course they knew. Of course they knew. They're, you know, I know who the company is. They're not stupid. It's that they weren't prepared. They weren't prepared to actually enforce the rules that are so easy and simple. They weren't prepared. And preparation is key. It's key for everything that we do. You know, the whole magic of putting on shows is if we put in the work before showtime, then everything looks easy. And that's the impression that we always want to give. But we know that all the work that we do is challenging, it's complicated, and the devil really is in the details. COVID-19 is no different. So, you know, any fool at this point can stumble upon reopening guidance, whether it's ours or somebody else's. They're almost all free. They're floating around the internet, and they're good. There's some pretty robust, granular guidance out there, not just ours, but others too. But then you have to find people who are willing to enforce that guidance. And that is where we are now. And whether it's people who simply don't want to enforce the guidance, or, you know, Sturgis, or they're not prepared to, chain smoker show, that's where we are. There's nothing wrong with doing drive-in events. They work. I've been to them. They work just fine. I mean, everybody on, you know, listening to this probably has seen in the last 24 hours the photos of socially distanced concert goers in Newcastle, England. Fantastic. You know, raised platforms with you know, railing around them. Great. Is that materially different than the circles that have been painted on the grass in New York and San Francisco and other cities? No. Yeah, there you go. It's a beautiful image. Fantastic stuff. It's simply an application of what we have known for months. 6 feet or 2 meters, social distancing is just, it's one of the 3 threshold issues. And if you're not prepared to enforce it, stay home. Stay home. Don't put on a show. Don't do the engineering work. Don't participate in something which is likely to get people sick. With, you know, it's a pandemic. No sugarcoating this. You know, there are anti-science people who, you know, I can't even talk to because they simply are not speaking the same language as me, and I suspect as you guys and your listeners. So leaving aside the anti-science nutcases, you know, Darwinian selection may get them, may not, but that's not a conversation worth having. The conversation worth having is, we know what to do. How do we do it in a way that we can enforce it so that people can be healthy and safe during a global pandemic?
Sure. I think one of the things that's going to be, as you were talking, you know, it's one thing to have a promoter in a venue who says, hey, we are going to enforce this. Find the people you can to educate them. I think that the other hurdle is getting people to respect the enforcement of it is going to be a big deal. And like, you know, it's funny, you alluded today in some of your videos, you're like, you know, it's baffling how stupid people can be, or how I forget exactly how you phrase it, but it's like the fact that we have to tell people that, oh, you should wear a mask and stuff, right? I like that you use the term, everyone keeps saying the new norm, right? I like you repositioned that and called it, this is the new abnormal, right? Because that's what this thing's abnormal. And you also talked about people, you know, pre 9/11 weren't used to bag checks and mag checks and all these things going to events. And now you go to an event and you're shocked if you don't see these things. You're like, wait, that guy looks suspicious, or why aren't we checking that? and that's probably going to be the new abnormal, normal, whatever you want to call it for us, that, we're going to think about hygiene and health and safety a lot more. And that's probably a good thing, and there's a lot of pain to get to that point. But the fact that the fact that it's had to be on the news for the last 6 months to tell adults to wash their hands, that's a problem. So it's, and I think, I'll speak for myself. I think in the past, when I think like, oh, the safety police are here, you think this, high school guy who's wearing his vest, who, not even high school, middle school, whatever, it becomes a joke, right? Oh, the safety police are here, right? You're like, no, this is that we, as a society, we have to take this much more seriously. And it's, so it's, the work that you're doing, the work that Event Safety Alliance is doing is massive.
Oh, thanks. We don't think of ourselves as fun killers at all. We're the people, you guys too, we're the people who enable other people to have fun. Right. We're the ones who do the crazy stuff and make it safe somehow. We're not fun killers. We're the ones who make it happen, for God's sake. We blow stuff up. We amplify the sound. We do all the nutty, insane things that get you the adrenaline rush that gets you out of your living room. That's the whole point of this, is we want to do insane stuff and then have everyone go home and say, wow, that was great, and do it again.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, it sounds like what I'm hearing from you, Steve, is like, there is an avenue by which we can do this, because the guidance right now is not, hey, we can't have any live events. Although I think that's where a lot of people in our industry have like fallen into that mindset, where it's just like, we're done. And that is our present reality. But I mean, it sounds like, no, there's a way forward here, and it's going to be baby steps, and it's going to take, a lot of mindfulness and responsibility and professional dedication. But I mean, like the reopening guide, like you said, these are the steps towards getting our wheels spinning again, as an industry. And so, to me, that's, it's a positive discussion, like, let's talk about how we can do this, how we can make this work. Right.
Right. I mean, it's all about putting on events, not canceling them. We know there's a problem, but what do you do when you have a problem? When you've got an audio problem, what do? You work the problem, because you have to solve it. You have to get to a solution. Right. For our industry, there is going to come a time when some very significant number of people economically cannot stay in the industry. And this paycheck protection program, round 2, it's not cutting it. There are people who are going to have to leave our industry and not come back. There are independent nightclubs that are starving from one day to the next. We're going to lose them. And, not to overplay the importance of live events in our society, but I think one of the takeaway lessons of everybody staying at home and being absolutely out of our minds, stir crazy, is it turns out that, entertainment really does matter. It's important. What we do actually has importance. And, I take some pleasure in that. God knows I don't like the way we've come to this sort of mass realization, but, this is a time for us to realize that we actually have an important place in society. Even if we rarely put on long pants and we wear a lot of black clothing, we're not goofballs.
Right.
We're serious people, and we deal with serious risks, and we handle them so that people don't get hurt.
Yeah, I know it's what's one of the thought processes I've had, and this doesn't the train of thought I'm going to go down doesn't say, hey, well, I need to avoid safety because of this. But you make the statement of like, well, drive-in events work. Well, yes, they work, but the flip side coin of that is they are not financially viable. You know, like you are not making money on these drive-in shows. The amount of people you can get in place to do these things is it barely, if any, covers the cost of doing production right now. And I look at this I've been thinking about this for months now. I do a lot of corporate work, right? So, which means, you know, these venues are empty spaces, right? And you book a ballroom because you can fit X amount of people and it costs you X amount of dollars, right? If you're going to have the same size event, you're going to have twice the amount of ballroom space, which means it's going to cost the client twice as much. You're not going to be able to do buffets, so you're going to have to do plated food, which is going to cost you twice as much. Your meal break or your coffee breaks aren't 15-minute breaks anymore because you can't fit 500 people through the doorway in 15 minutes. You're now 2 hours on your coffee break. So I don't say all these to say, hey, we shouldn't do anything, but it's going to cost us a shit ton to do what we were doing and return. I say it to more of like, you know, it's a harsh reality of what it's going to, you know, how long it's going to take for us to get back to normal. So all the more reason, I think, when we think about these harsh realities, okay, what can we do in these small worlds? However, the same argument I just made, these clubs and like restaurants and stuff can't maintain their staff on a half capacity club. So how do we even get the small venues to open up when they can't afford to open up? And I'm not asking you these questions. These are more just all the thoughts we have rattling around in our heads. And it's like, we're all in the same place of being frustrated about it. I don't know where I'm
We're
going
asking
with
Kyle the question,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, me and you, dude, we're just gonna bitch about it.
Yeah, you know, I think part of this too is right. So, and just see if you don't know this, but like, you know, we have basically not talked about COVID this entire time. We've basically said,
Good
hey,
job.
we're going to talk. We're going to talk about our industry as if it's happening, and just talk audio, right? But so I think some of this is it. I've been thinking all these things. I finally have a chance
up, bro.
I have a chance to actually say these things. You know, it's you know, because you know, we're not just doing these events to collect a paycheck. This is our passion, right? This is what we live for this, and so all the more reason. I know, literally, just coming to this interview and talking about this has given me a new perspective on what I personally need to do from a safety standpoint, and what I plan on preaching moving forward, because I'm not done living my passion. I'm not done letting other people mess up this industry. So, yeah.
And I think, you know, as you said, Steve, like this is what we do. We solve these problems, right? That's what engineering is. We are presented with an issue and we try to create a solution. And I took a class in college. It was taught by Livingston Taylor, who's James's brother, and is a fantastic musician, entertainer.
Livingston Taylor performed at my college when I was there many years ago.
There you go. So one of the things he said was, people don't go to concerts to listen to the music because they own the record. They can stream it now. It used to be they own the CD, but that's free. That's at your house. So if I can stay in my house and listen to that music for free, why would I go pay $100 and stand in a crowd? And it has nothing to do with hearing the music. It's an experience. That's why it's not, you know, sufficient to go like, okay, well, no, but they can't do a show, but that's okay. We can play a live stream concert and people will watch that. It's not the same. It's never going to be the same. That's better than nothing. But, you know, we as a culture, I think who we are as humans, we have to get to a point where we can go out and do concerts, do live events, because like you said, it's in the very fabric of who we are. It's that important to us. So yes, let's do what we need to do and find a way to navigate this and to get back to doing what we love. And so that's why, like Chris said, we you know, it's just been so much speculation for this industry for so long. And so that's why we're finally braving the waters of COVID on this episode, because we have you here, Steve, and it's not, you know, you study this stuff for a living and you're an expert in it. So it's nice to have some sort of concrete concepts about it. So thank you again.
Well, I feel kind of bad when I talk about this stuff sometimes because I'm definitely a glass half full guy. I'm fundamentally, an optimist, and I'm optimistic about the more distant future for our industry for the reason I just said. Clearly, people want entertainment. When there's a vaccine that is widely used, God willing, soon, I'm envisioning like a scene out of Caligula where people are just like fornicating in the streets, waiting to go to shows, and our venues are full and our calendars are just chock full, and we're trying to figure out how to fit everything in. And I believe that's going to happen. But right now we are living through the new abnormal. We are in an interim period. And you're right, the economics don't work. They suck. They're terrible. You know, when your production costs are all roughly what they used to be, but the revenue stream is 25% maybe. We know that math doesn't work. That's why there are various bills trying to work through the federal government to help fund our industry, because the economics don't work. Metallica, just local example, Metallica is going to do a drive-in show here in Scottsdale, where I am, in 2 weeks or so. And I'm going to go. Not a huge Metallica fan, but I just want to see people. I want to have the experience. Do I listen to Metallica normally? Yeah, once in a while, but I just want the experience of being around other people and hearing music and seeing activity. I want the adrenaline rush, because I can't get that, sitting in my office. My office is nice. I like it here. It's air conditioned. God knows, it's going to be hot as hell for that show. But I'm by myself and I miss people.
And that's why we do it, right? I always said to people, like, if you're in this for the money, you're doing a dumb thing. Like this, there are 1,000 better jobs. Yeah, it's like, this is not a job that people do. So it's very, I've seen so many of my friends and my colleagues get laid off, get fired, have to leave the industry completely. I mean, one of my friends, who's just one of the best system engineers in the field, in my opinion, is working in an Amazon distribution center now. And that's crazy to me. But, these are the people who do this because they love it. And these are the people who, a lot of them will come back to it because they love it. But, in the meantime, it's like you said, it's all of the production companies who can't keep the lights on. These companies that own millions of dollars worth of gear, and that costs money to just own that stuff and to keep it in inventory. And I'm a freelancer, you know what I mean? Yeah, I'm a freelancer. I own very little gear myself, but I still, comparatively speaking, it's nothing, but I still have a lot of money tied up in this stuff. And so that, that's the concern for me, is a lot of these companies just, it's going to be a real challenge to get to the point where we can go back to them being able to go out and do what they do again and start turning a profit.
So I'd be curious. So, we said we were going to sidebar the legal side of the things, but I think it'd be maybe good to give some education.
Sidebar. Very clever.
To give some clarification. So, let's maybe talk about why, so some of the people who probably listen to this podcast do work in maybe one of these smaller venues, and they want to know what is their, am I going to be responsible if I, of this stuff, right? So can you maybe dig into, oh man.
And let's say, Steve has a 40-minute YouTube video where he really digs into this. So maybe you can give us a couple of the bullet points, Steve, and anyone that wants to really dive into that, we definitely encourage them to go check out what you have on YouTube and dig in a little deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version of here. This will be a happy story. So it's all been sort of dark and gloomy until now. Let's tell you a good story. So settle in. This is like, Steve's fireside chat, the law, a happy story. So, here we go. Okay. I'll give you the lightning round. This will be fast, but if you're the type of person inclined to take a note or two when a lawyer is telling you stuff, get ready. 3, 2, 1, let's go. Okay. Wow. Hey. Cool.
Oh, Chris has your slide, man. All right.
If you're watching this on video, and if you're not, you can come back. But hey, I have a slide ready for Steve. So yeah.
Holy cow! This is very impressive.
And it even has a picture of Steve on it. Yeah.
No, this is excellent. You guys really are prepared, which is exactly the point. This is what we do. We are people who geek out on preparation. It's why stuff doesn't blow up all the time. Okay. Anyway, so. The happy law story. Why you shouldn't worry about losing, your house, your car, your savings account by putting on a show. So the reason has to do with the law of negligence. So we're talking about negligence claims right now. So let me set up a quick scenario. The scenario is somebody goes to one of your shows and, then within the 2-week incubation period for COVID-19, they get sick. Let's make it a happy story for them too. They are, mostly asymptomatic. They go through a little discomfort and then they're fine. So they are physically healthy. That's good. You can have your children still in the room, but they're upset. They suffer emotional distress and they're looking for somebody to, pay them some bucks. Should you be concerned? No, you should not. Here's why. There are 4 elements to a tort. They're up on the screen for those of you who are watching this, which is very helpful. There are 4 elements to a tort. I will tell you what they are right now. They are duty, breach, causation, and harm. Let me explain what those are in context. Everyone has a duty to behave reasonably under their own circumstances. Let's apply that. Right now, we're talking about COVID-19. We're in this new abnormal, this interim period. It will end, but we're in it right now. The duty of care for anybody who's involved in event production, audio engineers, promoters, security people, the venue operator, everybody in every part of our food chain has a duty to behave reasonably under the circumstances, which in this case means during a pandemic for which there's not enough testing. God knows the test results are too slow. There's no contact tracing because we're Americans, and there's no vaccine, at least on the near horizon, and we don't know what's going to happen on the more distant horizon. So the duty is to behave reasonably with people's health and safety under those circumstances. That is our duty of care. So remember, the first element of the 4 elements of a tort is duty. We just said what it is. The next element, and these are 4 things that a plaintiff would have to prove. So remember our person who got sick, not very sick, but they're upset. They would have to prove each of these 4 elements against you, whoever you are in the chain of creation of this event that we've hypothesized. So it would be the plaintiff's burden to prove that there is a duty. Well, they would be able to because there is one. They would have to prove that there is some kind of breach of that duty. Let's come back to that in just a minute. The third element is really the happy part of the story, because this fictional plaintiff would also have to prove that by a preponderance of the evidence that your event was the proximate cause of them contracting COVID-19. This is a happy part of the story because by the time your event, your venue, your job is back up and running, lots of other stuff will be up and running already. We know that. We were the first industry to close down. In many respects, we're the last to reopen. So that means that, your local supermarket, it's been open all along. People can congregate in other public places, and whether it's maximum of 50 or 25 or 10 or 100, depending on where you are, but other stuff is open, which means by the time somebody is able to go to an event that you're working, they're able to go to lots of other places, and they are. And so what that means for proximate cause purposes is that victim, our fictional victim, will not be able to prove by a preponderance of the evidence, which means roughly 51%, more likely than not. They will not be able to establish by a preponderance of the evidence that unlike all the other places they went to during the 2-week incubation period for COVID-19, the only place where they were exposed was yours. They will not be able to prove that. Now, that I'm really confident about. Let me give you the counterpoint just so you understand why you should be confident in this analysis as well. So we're still on the element of proximate cause. We'll come back to breach. I'm holding that. So we just said that the reason that the plaintiff will not be able to establish proximate cause when they go to a show is because lots of other stuff is open and they can go to it, and doubtless they are. There are 3 environments that I can think of where it would be very easy to prove proximate cause by a preponderance of the evidence. They are cruise ships, nursing homes, and prisons. And what those three places all have in common, which no environment that you would work in has, is no one leaves. They are completely closed circuits. And so the first people that we experienced in the US who got sick were people coming back from cruises. And the second group was the group of people in Kirkland, Washington, in that unfortunate nursing home. And then, it turns out that prison populations are vastly disproportionately affected by COVID-19. For them, proving proximate cause is really easy because they're not going anywhere. No one's going anywhere. But that's completely different than your situation. So for your situation, there will not be a victim who can say, the only place that I contracted COVID-19 could have been your show, because that simply will be factually impossible. Now, you win on proximate cause. Now let's go back to breach, because you'll win there too. In order for somebody to prove, again, by a preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not, in order for somebody to prove that you breached your duty, they would have to say, well, what did you do and what did you do wrong? Well, turns out that COVID-19 is a really sneaky bastard. And lots of people will be either completely asymptomatic carriers, or the time when you're most infectious is when you are pre-symptomatic. Now, I'm a lawyer, not a doctor, but excuse me, I can read, and you can too. And this is stuff which is on the CDC website, on the World Health Organization website. Johns Hopkins University has a really robust website about COVID-19. I highly recommend it. And it turns out that it's going to be really hard to show that any venue or anybody involved in allowing patrons or workers to come work at a venue, it's going to be really hard to establish that any of the arrangements, the temperature checking or the, answering questions on a clipboard, it's going to be really hard to prove that any of those things was a breach of your duty of care, because so many people will be completely asymptomatic, which means you can do everything right and there will still be infected people in the venue. Look around to your left and to your right, and chances are pretty good that one of those two people is going to be currently infected and they will have not shown any symptoms at all. They will pass even the most robust ingress, safety, and health measures because they won't show any symptoms. They won't know that they're sick. So the four elements of a tort, duty, breach, causation, and harm, you will definitely win on proximate cause, and almost certainly you would also win on breach. So do you have to worry about lawsuits in the context of COVID-19? No, you don't. And, circling back to what we said before, depending on what state you're in, there are 16 or 17 states as of right now, August, whatever today is, the 14th, that have already passed state laws providing some measure of immunity for people who are working in the chain of creating live events. And so basically what those statutes do is they raise the burden of proof of our fictional victim from a preponderance of the evidence, 51%, to clear and convincing evidence, which is the standard in criminal cases, and we generally assign a 99% certainty value to that. So basically, depending on what state you're in, it may be that the plaintiff has to establish these four elements that I just described, not by the usual more likely than not standard, but rather by a clear and convincing standard, which by definition is virtually impossible to prove. And that's why legislators are setting that as the new standard for COVID-19 cases. So 3 different ways: proximate cause, breach, or legislative immunization from liability. The law is not your problem. COVID-19 is your problem.
proverbial
Yeah,
mic drop
exactly.
there at the
Proverbial
end.
mic drop.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Best podcast ever.
We need more lawyers on the show.
Yeah, man. Sound guys are getting boring. You're cool for a Red
Steve,
Sox fan.
I have a very interesting question when we're talking about torts and
I love
liability
the way
and
you
stuff.
preface that. It's your question, and you're deciding it's very interesting.
It's interesting to me. Okay, let me rephrase. I'm very interested in your answer to my probably very boring question.
There we
There we
go.
go.
Because a lot of my work centers around sound level and exposure and making sure that our events are not, so loud that they're damaging people's hearing. And as you were going through that explanation, one of the things I was thinking about is that from a scientific perspective, we have a very good idea of what sort of sound levels will cause hearing loss and what won't. And so to the point that we can literally measure it with a dosimeter, whereas, we can follow World Health Organization, NIOSH, OSHA. There's a lot of guidelines in place about what is okay and what is not okay. So, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, but we're living in an age where we're not gatekeeping that information now, because anybody in the venue can have an iPhone or an iWatch or, that says, hey, these are dangerous sound levels. And so what happens when someone who is a concert goer goes to Live Nation or the venue management or whatever and says, hey, you're exposing me to harmful sound levels. I want to sue you. Can you apply some of that reasoning to that situation?
Yeah. So in my experience, so my law practice deals with safety and security at live events. This is all I do. So I would think that if this were a common scenario, then I would have at least heard about it, if not dealt with it myself. And I'm happy to report that I have not heard about this scenario. What I have heard is there will be shows that are so loud that somebody is uncomfortable. Generally, what they do when they're uncomfortable is they leave. They may leave, and on their way out, they ask for their ticket price back. That's not an unheard of scenario. I have heard of that. And really, at that point, it's up to the promoter to engage in good guest services practices. And, the most likely scenario is either they refund the ticket, or, they give a rain check to a future performance, or, give a discount at the merch stand, something that makes the patron happy again. The threat of litigation, it's not very likely because of proximate cause. So imagine what would be the damage that someone would suffer from going to a show. So let's take it front of house first, and then we'll take it back of house, because I think that's a more interesting scenario. So front of house, patron just leaves. And, it's one show, maybe they suffer some tiny percentage of hearing loss. They're not going to know about that. They're certainly not going to bother to quantify it. There's not going to be a lawsuit in that scenario. They're just going to be upset, and hopefully whoever is the promoter will make it right by them one way or another with either tickets or merch. For workers, that's a much more serious risk, because you're not able to just leave, and hopefully you're wearing hearing protection, but that's not perfect. And there are times when you can't wear hearing protection and you've got to do your job. So that is a more serious risk, because it's just built into your profession.
And you're also exposed. I mean, there's a big difference between, from the data, we know that there's a big difference between being exposed 4 times a year and being exposed 5 nights a week. So the engineers and the venue staff are the ones that are going to have this problem first, for sure.
Well, that's right. The engineers, the venue staff, and the artists. Pete Townsend probably would love to hear The Who now, but can't.
Ouch. Good one.
So that's really the greater risk. And in that scenario, there's a fairly traditional remedy, which is speak up. Say something. You got to speak up. There isn't a more complicated solution than that. The local ordinances in whatever community you're putting on a show will have some maximum number of decibels that are appropriate both during sound check and during the performance. But, That's not going to help you if you're exposed to the upper limits night after night after night for your entire professional career. You won't be able to hear anything either. So,
yeah, and I think some of this goes back to we talked about, like, the whole point of us even caring about this reopening policy and all this is that we have a moral obligation, as we've called it, to care for one another and actually first ourselves. If you can't, the airplane thing, right? If you don't put on your mask first, you can't help someone else, right? So if you're not protecting
Secure
yourself,
your own mask before helping those. Yeah,
if we're not protecting us as engineers first, well, then you're definitely not protecting the security bouncer who has to sit down in front of that stage and get demolished all night long in front of those front fills and subs. So it goes back to the root of us caring about the levels that we're doing at these shows has to be because we care, first about ourselves and about the other people.
Right.
And then secondly, yes, could there be litigation, lawsuits, whatever down the road? Sure. But I think it goes back to the safety thing, that it has to be the care for the human body before you care about the dollars.
Well, it's professional responsibility. I mean, if I'm mixing, I'm in charge of a system that is powerful enough to hurt people, and we know that. And there's not really any debating that anymore. That as Austin Powers would say, that train has sailed, right? So, I think it literally comes back to, well, I have a professional obligation to not hurt these people. That's part of my job, is to do this responsibly. So, I know that's not something that you've been focusing on, Steve, but thank you for indulging me, because that's something that I've been spending a lot of my time on. So it's really interesting.
He loved his question. He loved his question a lot.
I did.
My question was so interesting.
So good.
Brilliant question. I mean, let's tie a bow around this, because we've sort of circled around the same thing now several times, and I think it's really important. As a lawyer, it amuses me to see how much non-lawyers are frightened about the legal consequences of their actions, because many actions don't have a lot of legal consequences. Your sound level question doesn't have a lot of legal consequences. But I think the more important issue is what we owe to each other, what our role is in society. I mean, at the risk of taking this, interesting discussion into, philosophical realms that none of us are really qualified to address, but that actually is the issue, isn't it? That, we not only owe ourselves and our loved ones a duty to work safely, but we're members of an industry that, our industry exists because we gather people together. I mean, we were going to talk about this crowd management ANSI standard. We don't really have time, I guess, but the point of even mentioning that is our work is based on mass gatherings of people. We don't work solo. Our whole existence is predicated on large numbers of people being influenced by our decisions, our work, our practices. So, yeah, it's good to know the legal consequences of your actions, at least a little bit. But really, the more important thing, I would argue, is, it's a weird thing for a lawyer to say, it's more important for you to know how to do your job safely so that there aren't legal consequences, so you don't have to worry about it. Really doing the right thing is the right thing. Then you don't have to worry about what Steve Adelman would say.
Spike Lee had it correct.
Safely.
Spike Lee nailed it. Do the right thing.
Yeah, do the right thing.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, Steve, thank you very much for your time and for your knowledge on this episode. It's been a real treat for us. I am certain the listeners will enjoy it and benefit from your knowledge. And I know that I'm proud to say that ProSoundWeb, we have done our little part in trying to spread the word about the ASA guidance, and we do have some information posted on ProSoundWeb about crowd management and about the reopening guide. I know we did include that in our daily newsletter and stuff, but obviously folks can go to the ESA website, right, and check out all this information. What's the best place to get all this stuff?
Yep, eventsafetyalliance.org.
There you go. And check out Steve's YouTube, man.
So this is the first time we're giving y'all homework. You need to go download those PDFs right now. Do your homework.
And they're not long and they're not hard to read. Steve, as a technical writer, I can tell you, man, they're very, very well written documents. So you guys have done a fantastic job with that.
Oh, thanks. You know,
Yep.
we are
Thank you so much.
you guys. You know, we're back of house because that's what we do. So, you know, we knew who our audience was. We don't want to read anything complicated or long or hard, so we didn't want to write it that way.
That's great.
That's great.
So we, as Chris said, we encourage everybody to go check out those, and we can actually put links to those documents in the description of this podcast for people to check out, and we'll do a link to Steve's YouTube channel as well. Steve, thanks so much for being with us, man.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome.
All right.